Greetings and welcome. Before I begin my critique of John McCain's ideas on foreign policy, a few disclaimers are in order. First, just because I am opposed to the candidacy and ideas of John McCain does not imply that I support the candidacy or ideas of Barack Obama. As a matter of fact, I disagree with both of them on pretty much everything. And, full disclosure, I will be voting for Bob Barr in this presidential election. So, I do not want to be accused of being a leftist or of being a socialist, although I do believe that Barack Obama's approach to foreign policy is marginally better than that of John McCain, which is why I'm devoting this presentation to critiquing McCain's foreign policy and not Obama's. My second disclaimer is that I do not hate America, I do not hate the United States military, and I do not in any manner like or endorse the self-proclaimed enemies of America. Namely, I believe that the world would be a much better place if all of the dictators, all of the terrorists, all of the theocrats and fanatics one day just died. And I am very happy that some of them have already died. For instance, Saddam Hussein. I have no problem with Saddam Hussein's removal from power or his execution as such, although I do have some problems with the means that were pursued to remove him from power. That said, let us examine John McCain's position on the Iraq occupation. Wikipedia states the following about it, quote, "On Iraq, McCain's goal is that by 2013, most of the servicemen and women will have returned, the Iraq War will have been won, and Iraq will be a functioning democracy, although still suffering from the lingering effects of decades of tyranny and sectarian tension. McCain expects that by 2013 there will still be violence, but at a much reduced level, and without American troops in a direct combat role." Now, the issue with American troops remaining in Iraq until 2013 becomes clear when we compare the situation to others in American military history. It took the United States and its allies fewer than 4 years after U.S. entry in December 1941 to win World War II, a conflict against some of the most aggressive and totalitarian and difficult dictatorships in history. On the contrary, as of late 2008, the Iraq occupation has already lasted over 5.5 years without victory in sight. If World War II could have been won during 4 years of American participation and 6 years of total duration, then surely a small Middle Eastern country does not need 10 years to be pacified and stabilized. Surely a competent effort would have accomplished the task in much less time than World War II occupied. And since more than 4 years has already elapsed, we are left to conclude that the Iraqi occupation was a highly incompetent effort. Instead of attempting to salvage it with more losses in lives, it is imperative to keep a bad situation from becoming worse. My proposal, which I made at the beginning of the year 2008, and I still adhere to, is to begin a dramatic withdrawal from Iraq at the time the new president, whoever he is, takes office. That is, at the beginning of 2008, I said if it is really the case that Iraq must be stabilized, then we should give the military a year to do it. And if the military is competent at its job, if the U.S. government's plan for stabilizing Iraq permits the military to act competently, then within a year, either the stabilization will succeed or it will fail. If the stabilization succeeds, then there is no longer any reason for U.S. military presence. Therefore, a withdrawal is justified. If the stabilization fails, then it is shown that the entire effort was futile and mismanaged, and continuing on the same path of mismanagement will only result in more futility and more lost lives. Therefore, a withdrawal is justified. But the issue here is a more fundamental one. Granted, the removal of Saddam Hussein was a desirable goal, as is the desire to have a free or semi-free Iraq, as opposed to a totalitarian one. But we need to ask whether just because an objective is desirable, this means that government should undertake it. After all, education, healthcare, food, and housing are all desirable objectives. But whenever government has provided these goods, the result has been disastrous and has been the opposite of the policy's stated intentions. Rather than make the good more available, government provision of the good often makes it scarcer, which is why countries where the so-called right to health care is loudly proclaimed and enforced also have the longest waiting lists for treatment and the highest mortality rates from deadly diseases. Irrespective of how desirable the objectives in Iraq were, the U.S. government was highly likely, due to the incentives stemming from governmental control, to make a horrendous mess of implementing them. If the occupation continues, or is reinforced with a surge, as is McCain's intention, then further mismanagement is inevitable. Whatever one may think of the ends McCain and other proponents of the occupation seek to accomplish, this means that they use central government planning and occupation by government-controlled forces are not proper to achieving those ends.